Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing well and I hope you're all staying safe. Today I am joined by one of the biggest Twitch streamers in Dead Cells, Mr. krobloons, and we had a fantastic conversations. We talked about so many different things outside of Dead Cells. We talked about mental health, we talked about social issues, we talked about current events, we talked about a lot of different things, and I'll also let this serve as the content warning because we do get pretty deep into these topics. We talk pretty extensively, as you can probably see by how long the podcast is. So yeah, I definitely did have a great time talking to him. I always enjoy his streams because he does not shy away from any topics on stream, and we were able to carry that into the podcast, and that was really awesome. So I hope you all enjoy the episode, but I did want to talk about that community post that I made yesterday, and that was about me opening up a Patreon. I'm still kind of undecided about it. I don't know how I want to go about it yet. I'll let you guys know whenever I do it. I'll make a video about it. And the other thing is that we are almost done with the season. We have 2 more episodes after this with Vord and with V.me. I'm very excited to show you guys all of that. And after that, it will be the end of the season. And I'm going to be taking a break from Chaos and Chill for a little bit. Putting together these episodes and doing the interviews, they're a little tiring. So I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break. And then starting season 2, Monospite's going to be joining me as co-host. And we're going to kind of iron out all those details while I am taking a break from the actual interview. So all that being said, Chaos and Chill, episode 8. There we go. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to episode 9 of the Chaos and Chill Cellscast. Episode 9? No, it's not episode 9. It's episode 8 of the Chaos and Chills. Okay, we're starting over. Welcome, everybody, to episode 8 of the Chaos and Chill Cellscast. It's your boy, AzumarillFairy, on the mic here, and we are joined today by Twitch streamer krobloons. If you don't know what Twitch is, it's a game streaming service, and he likes to play Dead Cells. And if you don't know what Dead Cells is, I have no idea what you're doing here. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. My other computer crapped out, and this computer is not great either because it's like 10 years old. So can't wait for the PC to come.
That's going to be a well-deserved upgrade.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like I get to actually stream. That's kind
is it going to be like a good streaming PC? Like you'll be able to actually get some done?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not going to be like playing on a laptop. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, I know some people who stream on laptops, so.
So why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
I'd like to call myself a variety streamer on Twitch, but I stream primarily Dead Cells, and I have been for probably the past year, a little bit over a year. I got into Dead Cells around the 1.1 time. It was right as Rise of the Giant was coming out, and that's when I started fresh. And I was streaming a lot of things on Twitch at the time, but it was kind of just like trying anything, like try this, average of 3 viewers, try this, average of 6 viewers. Oh, okay, cool. Try this, average of 2, back and forth. And then I got to Dead Cells, and it was like suddenly my viewership jumped up. I was having like active chat all the time. And the thing about the Dead Cells, streaming on Dead Cells on Twitch, was that the community was kind of what kept me really going in the game, because it's not the kind of antagonistic community that you'd expect from a lot of internet communities. It's a really supportive, like genuinely supportive community that likes to see each other succeed. So I had a lot of people who were literally just like coaching me from 0 BC all the way up to 5. And so, I mean, I got into streaming not to like do any kind of specific game streaming, but just because I love playing games and I'm addicted to playing games. And it seems like I'm cool with being kind of a reverse voyeur, so to speak, where people are watching me, and I've always kind of talked to myself and rambled to myself, so it seemed appropriate to just kind of put a camera on me and let people be entertained or mock me as they will. So, but the Dead Cells streaming, I mean, Dead Cells as a game really accelerated the growth of my channel tremendously, and was just such an awesome kind of open, fun game to play, where I don't feel like I've never felt like I need to play it one specific way. I've always been able to feel like I don't want to say like express myself through the game, because that sounds kind of weird, but there's more expression in Dead Cells in terms of what you want to do with the game than in other games, and especially, and I mean, even in other roguelites too. So basically, I got into streaming just because I love playing games and I love like interacting with other people on the internet and interacting with other communities. And then I got into streaming Dead Cells because it was just a tremendously fun game with a really, really cool community behind it that was like, when you have like a good group of friends and you don't want to, they're all hanging out and you can't hang out with them and you kind of feel bad because you want to go like hang out with them. Or even I've had work friends who like, where I don't go to work some days, I'm like, man, I wish I was at work with the cool group of people at work, and like I feel like that when I don't stream on days. Like I'm like, man, I miss like interacting with all the various people in chat and crave it and like want to talk to those people. It brings me, I don't want to say purpose, but it's nice, a little fulfilling. It's enjoyable. And I've always been a part of internet communities since I was 10 years old, been on like role playing communities, like text-based role playing, all sorts of stuff. So at this point, I love Dead Cells. And I'm kind of ingrained in it I've become absorbed into it because of how much I've played and how much I've put myself into it. So, but yeah, that's all I can think of about me. But
That's the longest answer I've received to that question so far. So
I'm very good at rambling, so don't get me started.
Hey, look, that's your charm, right? Because I go into your stream for your rambles. That's what sets you apart from everybody. And it's not even incoherent, like, well, okay, I'm not getting into politics.
Sometimes they're incoherent. You don't have to be that nice, but I appreciate it.
Most of the time they're coherent, though. Like, especially, I know I ramble, too. I've gotten a little criticism on my channel because I do that. So I hear you. And it's, I like that you will ramble about pretty much any topic that piques your interest. And it's interesting just to see, like, your thoughts on something as you're just like killing all these enemies and you go through an entire biome on the same subject, and it's like it's the coolest thing ever, and I love it.
I that's what I love about Twitch chat and just chat on those kind of sites in general is just like, and that's what I love about streaming. And like I love talking about Dead Cells. I just as much love talking about Dead Cells and informing people about Dead Cells and stuff. It's really cool. But like when somebody brings up something that I'm, semi-passionate about or just want to talk about at the moment or whatever, that's what I like about the stream is it's like, I don't always just have to make it about Dead Cells. And I think people who watch me pretty much know at this point that, they expect to have like 80% of the conversation not be about the game at all. But it's fun. I mean, I like talking with people. That's what's good about the Twitch chat. Cause when I started streaming, there was no chat. Like I would be playing Hollow Knight to 4 viewers and I'd be rambling, but I wouldn't be like, oh, let's start talking about this random subject because this person put me onto it by mentioning this thing. It would just be like me talking about the game. And I really felt like I had to work a lot harder to provide to fill airtime and provide entertainment. And that's what's great about streaming Dead Cells, for instance, is it just invites this whole active community in that it's like they do like a lot of my job for me, where all I have to do is just like read a comment over here and then come back over here and just talk. And so it's great. I mean, I love that. I like to help people and educate people as much as I can, but I also like to like just interact with people in general. So that's fun for me.
We were talking earlier about how about the whole college thing, right? And I did want to continue that conversation in some direction. And for the viewers who obviously were not there because there's no hidden cameras around either of our places, I hope. Can you describe a little bit about like what attracted you to streaming in the first place? Because I remember you were telling me like when you were in community college, like that was something that you wanted to do, or in high school.
Yeah, I really, what drew me to streaming was, I mean, I think obviously the fact that I've always played video games so much and like when I say I'm like addicted to video games, it's like I've got some games that I've got like tens of thousands of hours in. And like, I don't say that with a point of pride. I say that with a tinge of like, I wouldn't say that to just anybody because, there would be some people that would give you looks for that. Like, wow, that's literally months or even years that you've invested into video game on the internet. Like, yep, yeah, but I mean, it's all, but it's not like it's fulfilling for me. So why, it's not like it's destroyed my life or anything like that. I've done many other things to my life that have caused damage to me. And video games is probably one of the least destructive things on my life. So I don't know. I really didn't truly have like a goal for Twitch streaming until I started actually watching it though. Like, I was never, if I had known about Twitch streaming when I was 16, I probably would have started like streaming World of Warcraft when I was playing it. But I, wasn't really familiar, and YouTube wasn't really a thing taking off. I mean, I did record some like PvP videos when I played WoW here and there, but, it was hard to do anything with, there was no YouTube. So you had to use like specific WoW, like PvP websites that like, it was kind of awkward to work with. So I never really knew I wanted to do it. And then I started watching Twitch streamers, and I started realizing, obviously there's some streamers that really elevate it. There's some streamers that take it super far, that put tons of production value into it. And, and then there's other streamers that, put literally no effort into it whatsoever, other than turn on the cam, turn on the game, and start going. And then there's everywhere in between, and there's no like metric for success. It's not like, well, this guy over here who, has like the coolest overlay and the coolest layout and the coolest transition screens and all this stuff is vastly more successful than like, to give it like one example of just somebody I can think of with a very low effort, like Forsen. Like Forsen has nothing going on with his stream at all. It's just a chat, just spamming constantly, like vaguely racist and, inflammatory and shit at times. And like, but he's one of the most successful Twitch streamers. There's like no metric for Twitch success. And when I started to realize that, it was like, I should just start doing it. Like I should just start trying it, because the worst thing that can happen is you don't get any viewers and you don't get any response, and you just, whatever, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So it really didn't happen until I started watching a lot of Twitch streamers and realizing that it was, I would almost say, like obsessed or like fantasized about, Twitch streaming. And it has never really been about like, I think some people, think it's maybe about money, because a lot of people are getting into streaming because of the potential for monetary growth. But it's like, for me, it's more about community. And Dead Cells has already provided me with such a like active community of people that aren't just loyal to the game, but now are actually like want to like hang out in my channel and just watch me. It's like I already feel like I've experienced a pretty significant measure of success in my streaming. Even though I can't like necessarily support my life, my life with my streaming, I get a lot out of it. I definitely get a lot out of it. Like I am stressed and anxious when I don't stream, like when I take days off and stuff. Like it's usually the opposite. It's usually like I'm stressed and anxious before work, and I have nice relaxing days off. It's like taking days off from streaming, I'm like, should I just stream? Like, what am I doing? Like, do I have anything? Like, yeah, I do have a thing to do it too. Like what, I waffle all over the place. So I don't know. I basically just kind of like probably 4 or 5 years ago realized that it looked like a great job for me. And then, it probably wasn't until like 2 years ago that I was like, had enough. Cause I didn't have a computer until probably like 3.5 years ago. Again, like I had a computer when I was 20, and then I sold it to move to Portland, Oregon, and that failed. And then when I came back, I had no computer and anything and couldn't afford to buy one. So for like 7 years, I didn't have a computer. So, just recently kind of got back into like PC gaming and everything. And so, and then finally got a setup that was, good enough to stream with. So, yeah, there's my second long rambling answer.
It's all good, man. It's all good. I kind of expected this. And again, this is why I wanted you on, because you're very entertaining in what you talk about. It's like the meme of just man yells at cloud sort of thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of memes, I'm sure, that are appropriate to my thought process at times. But
you hit on a couple things, and I think one of the things that stands out to me is that the Dead Cells community being such an anomaly in the world of gaming, when every single gaming community I've ever been in has just been super toxic. Like, even Pokemon gets so toxic. Did you know that? It's a kids game and it's
Yeah.
so bad sometimes.
I feel like it's a lot of, I mean, to be fair, a lot of the adult players that play Pokemon that are the toxic ones, but still, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I've watched a little bit of like Pokemon's the recent ones that came out, like little streams of people doing like online battles, and like surprised at like the BM that goes into even that kind of stuff, and like surprised at how much BM that goes into, you know, even Pokemon when nobody can chat to each other. Like surprising what people get through still.
The entire intention of my channel when I first, okay, so here's the thing. I posted my first ever video like 2 years ago, but the channel was created like 5 or 6 years ago. It was intended to be a competitive Pokemon channel. I used to be really good. I used to be ranked, but never happened. I didn't know how to record back then. I didn't know anything. But like I would play on Pokemon Showdown, which is this online simulator. It basically works the exact same way as like the DS games. That was DS at the time, but the Switch games. The amount of times I got told to like, I don't want to say it on here, but to do harmful things to yourself.
Yeah,
And
I can.
yeah, you know what I'm saying. And racial slurs thrown at me and just everything. Oh my God. I had no idea. I didn't realize it was like that. And obviously not everybody's like that, right? I wouldn't even say the majority of people are like that. But if there's enough people that are doing that in a spot at once, that's when you're just like, I can't do this anymore. And that was part of the thing with me. It was like, this has happened to me enough times where I just don't want to be a part of the community anymore. But I still go on like r/Stunfisk, which is like the competitive Pokemon community. I still follow dudes on YouTube. So it's not like I'm completely gone from it, but I definitely don't play anymore. So it's kind of like that. But Dead Cells, it's been a community for what, 2 to 3 years now, and I just nothing. I've had a couple bad instances, but never like a whole like sustained period of toxicity, and that surprises me because the game sold 3 million copies.
Yeah,
A lot of people are in the community, but like I think really what it is because the game itself, this is kind of a subtle thing that I do want to talk about a little bit. The game is so subtle in like the encouragement aspect of it. Because even if you think about it this way, right? I think about the first 2 levels that you ever see, Prisoner Quarters and Promenade, right? So you got Grenadiers who introduce you to bombs. You got freaking Shield Bearers who introduce you to the fact that you can't kill enemies from one side. Archers introduce you to projectiles, and zombies introduce you to just general melee attacks or 2 attacks, right? And so Promenade, when you get there, you get introduced to the concept of protection through the protectors, and then through enemy teleportation. So you have that in mind as you see more enemies like the Rampagers or Slammers, and then later on in like 4 and 5 BC, everything's teleporting towards you. So it's like they build everything up so slowly.
Yeah.
And like they don't add everything in at once, and that's always what I've loved about this game is like, yeah, there's certain walls. Like 2BC is definitely a wall. I don't know about now, but I think like it
Little less.
Yeah,
from what I've heard, but I mean, I haven't actually tried it myself, but I have heard that the overall difficulty curve at the lower end is not as steep, and a little bit. I mean, I think it's just a little bit easier to overcome now that scrolls are off gear. That now that the Legendary Forge, it still has value, but it's not like a necessary, like you need to have at least some of S rank because you're going to need 2 stats on every single piece, regardless of its damage or health stats. Like you're going to need them at like 2, 3 BC plus. Now that's not an issue. So I think that it's easier for them to make it through 2BC quicker because they don't have to spend as long grinding out that forge. They might still get stuck there because of just the general new enemies or new concepts that get introduced, but I don't think that they'll have to like grind concierge runs as many times. Not as many people are going to have to do forge farming, which is cool. I like that personally, but
I think that's really good because I've always said on my channel, like, everyone has the ability to get to 5BC. It's just how much work are you willing to put into it? I suck at 99% of video games. I can't play Hollow Knight. I've never beaten the original Super Mario Brothers. I can't play most games.
I wonder how many people have beaten the original Super Mario Brothers. That game's pretty hard.
I don't know. The furthest I've ever gotten with the warps is like 8-2.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I've made it like close to the end, but with a warp. Yeah.
But like those old NES games, I can't play them. Like the types of games that I play, and I talk about this with Brew. Like I was playing mostly sports games, and then I would
Hmm.
occasionally play some random game on PS4, like just like the point and click type of games, like Life is
Yeah.
Strange or Heavy Rain, stuff like that. I still
Yeah.
play those games. I love those type of games. But like Dead Cells introduced me to like a whole different style of games, right? I've never even heard the term roguelike before Dead Cells. And like now I get into this genre. Certain games that I've been able to pick and choose that I like. Skull the Hero Side. I don't know if you know that game, but
I've heard of it. Yeah, and I've seen a little bit of it played. You liking that game?
I love it so much. It's the spiritual successor to Dead Cells, in my opinion.
That's a high amount of praise.
It's phenomenal. They have work to do on it because it's very similar to how Dead Cells was acting in the early access. If you know
Mhm.
about the early access, if the viewers at home, if y'all don't know anything about the early access, basically you beat Conjunctivius and then you died. So that's kind of what Skull the Hero Slayer is dealing with right now.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, it's just early access, so I mean, it's to be expected. But as long as the mechanics and everything are solid, I feel like that's more important than content. Like the amount of content in a game.
Yeah, I mean they have some stuff to work on as far as like control and jumping and things like that. But like Dead Cells had that same issue. Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of similarities. But like I've been able to see so many different types of games and then just get out of my comfort zone because of this particular game. Um, but yeah, I mean going back to what I was saying, like they teach you all these subtle things and then you just pick them up instinctively. And I started a series on my channel called Dead Cells Subtleties, just to kind of point out the very like just to make very apparent the subtleties, right? So
yeah,
stuff like airtime and stuff like two weapons that do the same thing, a flame turret and fire grenade. My
yeah,
next one is going to be like switching weapons. It's so just generally things like that. I appreciate that about the game,
yeah.
and I that's the other thing that's just drawn me to it completely. But I also think that's why the community is so healthy because of the game itself being so encouraging and then helping you as you go along. The community is also like that too. It's not a kill or be killed type of thing.
It's not a competitive. I mean, it's not a competitive like an arena, so to speak. And I mean, obviously, that might have to do with the fact that the game isn't competitive. So there's no like you beat me in a 1v1 and I'm going to be mad at you and I'm really insecure and now I'm going to insinuate stuff about your mom and stuff. It's like, I feel like with Dead Cells, it's more like, I mean, there are obviously going to be those people who will crop up who will be like, yeah, you could do this. Well, I could do that. But for the most part, people, they're more going to be like proud of their achievements rather than trying to, you know, swing it around and show everybody and show it off. Like they're kind of more like, I got to 3BC today. And like, it's cool when you have people who come into the channel and are like, just got Dead Cells today. And then, you see them for a couple of weeks talking in chat and they're like, hey, I got to 2BC today. And, you see them in other streamers chats, like, see them in Loot or Die's chat or something like that. And it's cool how the Dead Cells community is so inclusive of new people too, that people don't just feel like you might go into certain streams, even certain smaller streams. I've gone into certain small streams and found that, there might be like a very tight knit community that's so tight knit. They kind of ignore anybody new that might show up. And I feel like the Dead Cells community, like sometimes I don't even acknowledge new people. And like my chat is like conversing with them because I'm, again, on like a rant, and then I'll look over at chat and be like, wow, they're all talking to like a new person. That's cool. And then they go and they go see Loot or Die in the chat and they talk with Loot or Die for a bit. And then they see that he streams and then they go and follow him. And then they see, and it's just like, that's one reason why I think the Dead Cells community has been so successful, is because everyone within it is so supportive. But I don't know, it's a chicken before the egg thing. Is like, is it because the game is not a competitive game, or is it just because it happened to attract a really unique like range of people? Because I do think it has to do with how free the game allows you to play too. Like the game is so trying to think of the word, like stylistically, there's a lot of way to express yourself through the game. And you can see that in just any Dead Cells stream. If you go in and you could just go in and be like, just go into a random Dead Cells stream on a ship posting account and just be like, just Nutcracker's the best weapon in the game. And, you know, just like watch what happens afterwards. And you'll see people be like, hell yeah, dude, preach. And then you're going to see other people be like, Nutcracker's the worst weapon in the game. It throws every single run I'm ever on. And like, yeah, like I don't like Nutcracker personally, but I can see the value of it. And there's some people that love it. And it's like, that's what's great about Dead Cells to me, is that it's not like, there's so many games that I've played in the past where meta is such an important concept of it. I'll think like Overwatch, for instance. You get yelled at if you don't use the correct like heroes that people want you to use in their team compositions, like every time without fail. And like if you had to play 2v2, you know, competitive Pokemon, I can only imagine how much more toxic it would get if you had someone else on your team that depended on you, that would be like, you're using that 6 Pokemon? Holy shit, you're so dumb that you should be using this 6 Pokemon. And like, you know, so I feel like Dead Cells, there's no like enforced meta, because there's no like this. I mean, there are definitely items that are, you know, that sit on top of a very high throne, but then most of the other items I think are like, you know, one man's trash is another man's treasure, literally. Like, I feel like, you know, some people hate the electric whip. I think it's one of the best weapons in the game. There's so many different, and there's no like, you know, if electric whip was so good that everyone thought it would be good, it would just be like blatantly overpowered. So, and I think that is why Dead Cells is so popular, partially, is because it's just like, it's so, for how there's only 3 colors, you know, you'd think it would be kind of limiting, but it's not. It's like, even though you pick one color and go with it, the amount of different builds within that color that you can then spec into once you have enough stuff unlocked, and once you're, you know, progressed enough into the game, is enough to where you can keep someone like me not bored for 1,500 hours playing it. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And I feel that there's hundreds of combinations that you can run. I did the math the other day. I completely forgot the number of how many total combinations you can have. It was something like 3,190 something.
Wow, that's impressive. That's literally thousands. They could say that in their Steam page, thousands of weapon combinations for the player to use.
Well, think about it. It's like 37 melee weapons, 30 something ranged weapons, 13 shields, and then you've got like 40 skills.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you can run, and I think that's cool, you know. And having gotten to use every single weapon, you know, I come out with these ranking videos. I don't do tier lists, but I stay away from those. But I do like ranking videos. What I've noticed with my videos, and what a lot of my subs have noticed, is that I rank things really high. But that's also because most weapons in the game are good.
And I even found that to be true. I was the other day, because the last time I made a tier list, just because a bunch of people asked me to, was in 1.3. And I remember when I made the tier list telling people how, you know, there's a reason why most everything's kind of high up and I don't have a lot of things on the low on the tier list. And that's because I might not personally like an item, but, you know, like I might not personally, I'm trying to think of an item that I don't personally like. It's hard. I like so many of the items in the game now. I've forced myself to use so many things that it's like, I don't really see anything, you know, even Wings of the Crow now is like fun for a laugh at the very least. And exciting, and it's fun to dash around like you're, you know, Superman or something. But I don't know. I just the level of diversity within the game makes it so much more fun to play. And the tier list. Yeah, see, I got on a ramble there. The tier list back in 1.3. Even I like you said, even back then I had like 3 or 4 items in each category that were in like bad tiers, and everything else was like good. Like I had it as qualified as like at the very least good with like synergies. You know, the certain items might not be the greatest on their own, but you combine them with one other item and suddenly that does become like an A tier or an S tier item. So, and I went and looked at it the other day just because I was curious, like, you know, it's a 1.3 tier list, and I went through and was like, wow, there was like 5 items that were on the low part of the list, and all of those things like have over the past like 5 or so patches been buffed. So they've done a really good job in identifying where the kind of weaker items are in their layout of stuff and then bringing them up to a degree to the point where it's really hard to pick a loadout that is just blatantly bad. I think personally, like there can be loadouts that can be slower than others, but it's hard to find a loadout that is going to lose you the game. Like there are certain roguelites that you can play that through the glory of RNG and just bad hands, you just end up coming out with like a setup that you just can't beat a certain boss with. And I feel like Dead Cells is more like you can do pretty much anything, like you said, with like enough time spent in the game. And that includes like making a win with stuff that, 100 hours ago, you might not have ever seen yourself winning the game with, like a nutcracker. Like I would have never been able to win with a nutcracker back when I started playing the game. And now I just don't want to win with a nutcracker. But if like you had to force me to do it, I would reluctantly do it. I would try it at least. Maybe I wouldn't do it. I don't know.
I was trying to find my old tier list on Tier Maker. It looks like they reset it or something. But I was going to show you, like, I had some weird-ass opinions before, man. Like, okay, one weapon they've literally never touched is the Seismic Strike, right? Since it was introduced, it has not been buffed or debuffed or literally. The only thing they've done is that it doesn't do 75% to root enemies anymore. But that doesn't make a difference. I think it's one of the best weapons in the entire game, right? Everybody disagrees with me on it. I think it's phenomenal. I had that in 1.2 at the bottom tier because I didn't know how the hell to use it. And I thought because it was slow, it had to do a lot of damage. Then when I started actually using it, like a couple patches later, I realized, oh my God, I freaking love this weapon. And keep in mind, I hate most survival weapons. I don't like using, I know they're good. I don't like using them though.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like, I don't know, broadsword, like good weapon, very, very good weapon. Do I want to use it though? Not particularly. Like, giant killer. Okay, that's a bad example because I don't think it's very good, but a lot of people like it, right? I gotta respect other people.
Used to be insane, and literally in 1.2 I remember it was like even if it was kind of a boring weapon, it was one of the best weapons in the game because it did so much damage to everything. Like they didn't and now that they've nerfed the non-elite and non-boss damage, it's like it's still good in bosses, but you'll struggle in the biomes. And, because it's kind of like it'll be like a less punchy Seismic Strike without the utility at that point.
I got my first ever 5BC win with Giant Killer.
Yeah. I got my 4 BC. All right. Yeah, I got my fifth BC win. I got my 5th BC with a custom mode build that was basically Giant Killer, explosive crossbow, and power nade, and like Rampart shield. And I would just like go with explosive bow up until the cavern, because at the time I didn't know you could go sepulcher and skip the cavern and just go right to the giant from there. And then I would try to find a giant killer somewhere in the cavern. And, I must have done that run like 40, 50 times before I finally got the 5th boss. So I was about to give up. I've talked about that a lot, but 4 BC was a hard one for me to get through.
Was this in 1.2?
Yeah, it was right as 1.2 came out, because I got to 4 BC when 1.2 was finishing up in beta. So like people were telling me to go on the beta and try it. And like the day I went beta, like the next day it went to like live servers. So,
okay. Yeah. So I was watching, I want to say it was V, and he was doing Rise of the Giant. Like he went through that whole alpha beta process. Right. And so I was like, man, this is so cool. And keep in mind, I was on consoles at the time. And consoles didn't get Rise of the Giant for like 3 months for some reason.
Yeah. At least 3 months. Yeah.
I don't even think the devs know what happened there. I don't think it was their problem. I think it was like a Sony and Nintendo problem.
I thought I heard something like it had to do with the consoles themselves, like the console companies themselves. Because I know there was one update that got held up for like a week or two because like Microsoft wasn't like approving the patch for Xbox. And so like the both of the other, I can't remember which update it was, but I seem to recall like Switch and PS4 both got the update, and then Xbox was like, we're sorry, we're waiting on Microsoft to like approve it or whatever. So that, I feel like, I don't know if that's 100% legit, but somebody told me that once, and
I heard the same thing.
Okay. So maybe I can't trust my brain. So
it might've been like 1.4, I think.
I actually was going to say 1.4, so that could be correct, but that was just kind of like the thought that popped in my head.
Still the best update. Just saying. Um, it is my favorite because like I don't know, like this was like the last update because before they removed all the curses.
I don't even have like a favorite update as much as I just have updates that I am like, I feel like I still got punched in the gut a little by, like the curse update where they removed all sorts of curses from the game. Even though I can understand and respect the reason why they did that, and like I can look back and say, okay, you know, I respect their decision for doing that, but I do still there's a selfish part of me deep down that wishes there were still curses in the game. So, you know, I feel like what was that update? Was that 1.5 or 1.6?
That was 1.5 when they're and then they removed all the custom mode stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of where the updates started to, you know, there was some cool stuff being thrown in, and then some ideas that I was less keen on. I think that was probably one of the only things that I still kind of feel like they could maybe go back on a little bit when it comes to the curses. Like they could maybe add a couple more curses back to the game at the higher difficulties, I think, and not do too much to overbalance stuff. But to be fair, the balance at 5BC right now, I think is pretty good. I've been playing it a lot, and when 1.9 came out, I thought the balance was pretty terrible, and I complained about it a lot on stream about how wacky it was. It was like super hard in the beginning and then super easy by the end because everything was doing really low damage. But it seems like they've leveled everything off to a degree, and the beginning doesn't feel so insurmountable, and the end doesn't feel like such a cakewalk anymore. So I like the point of balance that we're at. I think that maybe a little bit more damage could be added to the last bosses. I had a Hand of the King fight today that I basically just totally botched and took like multiple hits to the face, and like barely even got put into any danger because he did such little damage. And I only had like 15,000 health, and he hit me like 3 times before I had to like drink a flask. And that was weird coming from, when the Hand of the King used to hit for 12,000, and maybe that was too much. Maybe they thought that was too much damage and they never intended for him to be doing so much damage or something. I don't know.
I feel, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think what they realized was there's a certain point to where you're going to get good, and then after that, it can get really frustrating and turn off a lot of players. So if you're a company and you want to keep people engaged and in the game, you got to make certain parts easier.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it was a smart move. Like, looking back, like, they did make 0BC harder, which I thought was very smart of them to do. It's no longer a joke. Yeah. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3 BC just a little bit easier. So that progression is it's smooth. Like it's not like
wow, is 0BC so easy? Is it like, the Reddit post? Is it normal for me to beat 0BC on my first try? And then the next post is 1BC is too hard. I'm uninstalling this game. Motion Twin, please nerf. Yeah, it's better now. 0BC is a little harder. It prepares people for what's coming better,
exactly.
Rather than just being like, whoa, this game's easy. What the hell just happened? Like, where did that come from? Where are my flasks? What's going on? Like, it's definitely preparing them better. I think personally, considering how many difficulty levels they have in Dead Cells, that they do I harp on them a lot for a variety of reasons, but I actually think they do a really good job of balance throughout everything. Like, considering that there's 6 difficulty levels, it's a 6, right? That's a fairly large amount of stuff to balance. So
there's only 5.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yes. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I wanted to make sure my math was right.
Switching gears a little bit. One of the things I've always liked about you is that you're not afraid to talk about not just mental health, but just like your experiences and the experiences of other people, and obviously I'm not going to ask you to be super explicit on this. You can share what you want to share, but I'd say for me, one of the biggest things that's helped with my personal mental health is just having this channel and having this community of people all over the world. Like the other day, I posted my 2.0 review, right? And in the beginning, I talked about Lebanon, and you know what happened there, right?
Yeah.
So I talked about the explosion.
I saw that actually. I saw the intro to your video where you posted that, and you posted some fundraising. It was like a charity.
Yeah, my friend, because she's from Lebanon, so she's been trying to get together like some.
That was crazy, man. Like not to derail or anything,
That's
but
fine.
like, and not to even like, just to from a purely like just outsider and like a really non-empathetic human, like I saw that and I was like, holy shit, is that a nuclear bomb? Is the world ending? Like, is that it? Like I was pretty like, that was intense.
Yeah.
That was intense to see the video of that. And it was so scary to see. I can't imagine being there, because I literally saw it and I was like, oh my God, it's starting. The bombs are dropping. It's fallout in real life. But
Exactly. Whenever something like that happens, there's so many aspects that you have to cover. And like it's one is the explosion. So like you got the obvious PTSD afterwards.
yeah.
You gotta, cover that. Then you got the economic situation. 300,000 people are homeless. Now you gotta cover that. Now you gotta cover what if someone you care about died. Now there's that end of the PTSD. Like there's so much that needs to be addressed. I don't know if you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but if you think about that, you have like your basic food, water, shelter type of needs. And then you have, the different needs that move up, safety needs. And then you've got the psychological needs and things like that. You've got to address each one of them. And it's just crazy how one thing like five seconds can like completely alter an entire nation.
Yep. Yeah.
And I was really, really young when 9/11 happened, but I know it was kind of a very, very similar effect.
Yeah.
And I was living in California, and I was 9 years old at the time. So it's not that people were detached, but it was also just like we didn't feel it as hard as like people in New York did. But I can imagine very similar effect.
Yeah, and I mean that was just slightly different because of how, like, I remember watching it on the news, and I remember the big thing that sticks with me was seeing it and being like, oh wow, like a plane crashed in the building. This is crazy. And I feel like there was a lot of like everyone was kind of the impression of like, wow, the pilot, was he drunk? Did he the navigation issues, the computer? And then literally you watch the second plane go into the other tower, and it was just like, that was a moment that sticks with me in my head forever, because it's like, and it's not necessarily something like, I can't say that I was profoundly affected by it in the way that many of the people were. There are people who literally are dying as a result of, taking part in the search and rescue operations, or just, the firefighters, the EMTs, the people who responded to that. Like, they're dying or are dead because of lack of healthcare and all that stuff. Completely different subject. That affected me profoundly, and probably a lot of people, that like realization that like, wow, this isn't like an accident. This is like an intentional act of terror. Thousands of people are dying. Like, it was definitely crazy to see, as like, I think I was probably 12 or so when it happened. And I remember afterwards I was part of like a nature survival program at the time, and like literally watched it on the news. And then it was like, okay, let's go to White Pine programs. And then they drove me out there. And then I remember going there, and like all of the kids were talking about it and everyone. And then they were just like, we are going to not talk about it for the rest of the day. And we're going to ignore it completely and never communicate. And I always remember thinking like, I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit in that group that we had, because it was a very supportive group, and it was very focused on, it was a nature survival program that was developed off of the Native Americans' teachings directly. So, you'd expect there to be a lot of, it wasn't like just like the Boy Scouts. It was like these people learned from a guy named Stalking Wolf, who literally was one of like the last like Native Americans of a particular tribe in New Jersey. And like they learned everything in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, which I've been to, and it's not as nice as it is in like the woods around here. We have pretty nice woods around here. It's like a desert. I don't know. I think it's important to talk about that kind of stuff, I guess, is my point, is that them shutting that out was kind of another moment that stuck out with me. Those were two moments on the same day. The first moment, that happening. The second moment, these kind of parental supervisal, people who were guiding us in a way, kind of being like, no, hush, don't talk about things. Let's just ignore it.
Yeah, and that's not all that uncommon. And I think there's two schools of thought with this. One is that I don't think a lot of adults realize that because kids are so expressive, they have to talk about this stuff.
Hmm.
Because there's not, especially back in 2001, there weren't a lot of outlets to talk about this.
No,
There was no Reddit, there was no Twitter, social media, there was nothing.
there
So,
was I had Instant Messenger, AOL Instant Messenger, and a
so
couple of
besides,
forums that I was part of, and that was it. Like I had no smartphone, I had no like connection to the world when I was, which is cool in a way, but also like you said, it was different back then. There was not as much of that ability to just shout your feelings out to the world like it is now, which for good or for bad, it can be good for kids' development to have an outlet where they can be heard.
a productive outlet, and that's what it seems like you
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Like
Productive,
you don't
yes.
want to go on some like alt-right YouTube channel and then just start spouting off. Like that's not productive to anybody.
No, no.
So yeah, I mean, but I do understand the perspective of the adults because they're trying to process what's going on. They feel responsible for the kids' emotional safety. So it's like, okay, how can I get to a point where I can process this and then talk to the kids so they can process it? And I get that line of thinking. I don't think it's explicit, but I think like they're thinking, okay, like I don't want these kids to talk about it anymore. But I think it's deeper than that.
Yeah, and I don't think that those people as like caretakers of children were definitely not the type of people to just be like shush nush now. Like they definitely had reasons for doing everything, whether or not they were the right things to do. I think that they were always very well intentioned um, guides. Like I'm trying to think of the proper word, but like just teachers. They
Mentors.
were teachers, and mentors. Yes, thank you. Yeah, they were very good. And they, even if they didn't always have the correct stuff to mentor us on, like they were doing it all with the intention of raising us to be conscious of the world, empathetic, and like aware of natural resources as well, and aware of our impact on natural resources, and stuff like that, which is another thing that I feel like is neglected in today's society. But
Like teaching people to care about the world around them.
yeah, exactly. Hold on
I
just one second.
Yeah,
It's just cold in here, sorry.
you're fine. I think as far as like, I think, and it's hard to describe, right? Because I think that we do have a lack of empathy in our general society, at least in the US. I can't speak for other cultures, but I think, empathy is not something that's valued. It's not something that's taught. I think that's changing, but I also think like, it's also moving back in some respects. I think for kids, it's so important for them to have an in-person outlet to express their feelings and to validate those feelings and be like, hey, like, I don't like, I can only imagine what you're feeling right now. Let's talk about what you're going through. So for me, that's super important because it's just, if you stifle anyone, not just kids, but like anyone's thoughts, if you stifle them, they start to isolate. And when they start to isolate, then it festers. When it festers, that's when you see a lot of the stuff that you see online, like a lot of the toxic behavior, a lot of the mental health issues, and a lot of the really just horrible, shitty things that you see. If you don't allow them, if you don't give them that conversation that they crave.
And sometimes it's, they find validation in, like you were talking about, like alt-right websites. They find validation in places where it ends up causing more kind of damage down the line. I mean, it's not even just in political stuff too, but I know within a lot of subsects of like the LGBTQ, there's like, there's like a lot of self-hatred
Yep.
that is sometimes humorous, but also sometimes is very like, it's like societal. Like it's because society goes around saying you're the F word and haha, and like, so they do it, and sometimes they're doing it as a way of kind of mocking society for the way that they look at them. But there's a lot of self-hating people within that group. And I don't know, that's like assisted. Like I watched a YouTube video about a woman once who was part of some of these groups, and you know as a trans woman herself, was literally like taking part in the self-hatred because she had no other way of finding validation anywhere else. And she was finding validation here for some reason, you know, even though it was not positive validation, it was still something. And she became kind of like addicted to it, to the point where she would constantly go on these message boards and talk about it, to the point where it was affecting her and creating a toxic line of thinking and a toxic just personality for her. And that I think is the point. I think I hate echo chambers. I hate when they're specific, and that happens a lot on the internet, because it's very easy to go over here to this random 4chan board where I'm not going to go there and start, you know, talking about the stuff that the alt-right people do, because like, why would I don't care. I know I'm not going to change any of their minds. I know they're just going to think it's hilarious. If I were to go on there and be like, stop posting really racist stuff, they're all just going to post memes about how stupid I am. You know, there's no point in going there. So I wouldn't be there. So the only people that are going to end up in those places are literally like-minded people. And then, you know how it is with with echo chambers. It just, you know, you then hear so many people validate your crazy thoughts, whatever they might be, that it sticks, and then it becomes reinforced, and then it becomes like very ingrained in your personality, and then you're sure of it because you have other people who say, yeah, totally, it is all women's fault, it's all the women, everything, you know. It's easy to fall into that, and it's difficult to then be approached by people outside of that and actually want to listen to what they want to say, because when you've based your whole personality around all of this kind of stuff, it can be really hard to unravel that, you know, without having to make serious introspective look, you know, take really big looks at yourself. And that's another thing that I've noticed, not to keep rambling, but another thing I've noticed within our generation and society in general is a lot of people I know really lack introspection, or the ability to be introspective, or just like think about things. Like,
I think that's just a societal thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if that's just something that's maybe being reinforced from previous generations, you know, because there's still kind of that, you know, boys don't cry mentality that's still kind of hanging on a little bit, because there's still some people that are like my generation that grew up with that line of thinking. So they're enforcing it on their kids now. And, but I feel like, to be fair, it's much more normalized to talk about your emotions like today than it was in the 70s or like the 50s or something like that, you know. So we're making steps.
I have a lot of thoughts on what you were saying, like so I guess I'm gonna ramble now.
Go for it.
What you were saying about the hating all women thing and all that, like, that's exactly what I was gonna mention, is incels. Because and I you know, people know when I am talking about something like this, it's not to bash anybody, but it's also not to sympathize with people who do some legitimate harm. This is just approaching this from a very analytical and like just like an analytical perspective, but also just like a cautious type of thing, you know? So these are people that have legitimate trauma to them, right? They've been bullied, they've been sexually abused, they've you know, they've got some legitimate insecurities that are a result of a very patriarchal and looks-based society. So it's like they have legitimate gripes.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with the echo chamber is that they reinforce the fact that they're ugly. They reinforce the fact that they'll never get a girl. They reinforce the fact that they're just not good enough. And that's where I think is the difference between a positive, validating community, like, you know, the Dead Cells community. I know Dead Cells is not a political thing, but, you know, just leaving that as like a positive reinforcement type of community versus like a echo chamber, like the incel community. And that's what leads to like people kind of, you know, getting more and more into their heads. And then once you start viewing people as like the villains that must be destroyed, that's when you see like stuff like all the mass shootings that happened in 2017 and 2018. You know, they were all politically charged. They were all done by a certain subset of people. And they all had ties to alt-right and incel communities because they were in those echo chambers for so long and they got radicalized. And I think, you know, part of the problem is that none of us want to engage with them.
Yeah, which I mean, to be fair, I was just talking about that too. I mean, and then also to be fair, I don't really want to go on 4chan because I'm cool with engaging with these people in a medium where it's kind of all on a level playing field. But you know, you go into 4chan and you're going into a kind of a much more, it's a different, like, I don't even like to go. I always feel like I'm gonna get like viruses on my computer when I go to 4chan or something. Like it leaves me feeling a little dirty. So
I've never
you
been
know,
on 4chan, so I don't know.
yeah, it's, you're fine, you're good, you don't need to bother.
Yeah,
It's
I'm just not really much into the whole meme culture thing. It's just never been my thing.
I'm always bad with the memes. Like that's why I like Twitch, because I've been able to actually understand like most of the Twitch memes and like feel like I know what's going on. But like I'm always one of those people that like, you know, never really fully understands the memes that people are using. There's a deep culture there for sure. But to touch really quickly on something that you were saying just before I forget,
Sure.
the incels, the insulated, the, you know, reinforcing the you're never going to get a girl because of your looks and stuff. Like I had a friend for decades, internet friend, met him when I was 14, I still know him. Was a virgin until he was like 35, totally comfortable with it, openly talked about it with me. You know, we would have conversations. He would just outright say like, I don't care about sex, I don't need sex, it's not something that I need, you know. But he also had a really, really low self-opinion. He thought he was ugly, he thought he was fat, thought he had a small penis, all that stuff that, you know, the guys get into their heads. And now he's dating a really cool chick and like literally nothing has changed. So it's just like, I feel like I was always trying to kind of, without, you know, not try to like meanly tell him, but kind of tell him like, dude, you know, like there's kind of someone for everyone. And you know, like I've never met a person who someone doesn't find that person attractive. So like it might be harder for some people, but to be honest, like most of the people I've dated have not been like very good looking or anything like that. And primarily that was because I grew up and was like 300 pounds and, you know, super obese and very, very self-hating and, you know, had a really bad mental image of myself. And then I lost weight, but it kind of kept going. So, but I put up with some pretty shitty relationships as a result of that. And I think it's just important to remember that, like, and this could just go for literally anybody out there who might, you know, be still like a virgin and be ashamed of it or something. Like I was a virgin until I was 21 years old. Plenty of people, it just takes time with some people. And, you know, so I don't know. It always sticks with me. My friend Tom, who was just always like, nah, man, I'm never going to find a girl. Like, it's fine, I'm cool with it. And then now he's dating a really cool girl, and he has been for like 3 years, and he really, really likes her. And it's like, you know, and she makes him feel very happy. It's not just like, it's not like you just need to get into a relationship, you know, but when you find someone that makes you happy, it's like, it can help you because, and we're talking about, you know, therapy and stuff. It's a support network. When you find the right person, it's like finding one of the best support networks you can find. It's almost like, it almost feels like you're using like a, like, not to make a lame gamer reference, but it feels like you're using a cheat code in like a video game or something. You suddenly have like, you feel like you're playing co-op in a game that should be single player, you know, that is single player, you know. So you know, just don't like join those echo chambers where people are gonna be like, yeah, totally, all women will hate you forever. Like, you know, go somewhere supportive where people will be like, who cares? Just, you know, don't sweat it. Just keep going. And that's, again, to touch back on the Dead Cells community. We talk about shit like this all the time. It's not just Dead Cells. We talk about stuff like this all the time. And this kind of stuff gets touched on a lot. And it's like, that's why I like the Dead Cells community, because we don't argue, but we, you know, we're not like, yeah, totally, dude, yes, everything that you said all the time. Like people say like, no, I kind of disagree. I think that, you know, we were talking today. It was like, we were talking about biomes, and, you know, it was like, I would be like, I used to hate the ancient sewers. That was my least favorite biome. And you were like, I think the ancient sewers is the perfect biome, and it's one of my favorite biomes. And it's like,
Yep. Yep, I remember that.
so, but there's never this element of like, well, screw you, man, because I think the ancient sewers is dumb, and you're dumb for liking it. It's like,
Yeah.
because also that would be wrong to say that, because the ancient sewers is a really great zone from a like design perspective and everything. It is a fantastic zone. It just, I hate any zone with spikers in it to some degree, because I'm blind, and like red colors are hard for me. I'm not actually blind, but like red colors are hard for me to see. And I swear they're little floor spikes. There's so many times when I've been tactics where I've just been like one shot and I can't even see anything because there's just so much visual noise on the screen. So, but ancient sewers are great. And the point being, it's a cool supportive community, everywhere, not just on Twitch too, but like in other aspects of Dead Cells. And it's just like, people like the game. They like to talk about it with each other. They like to give their opinions, but not in a rude way. It's great.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the coolest things is, I've got my channel now. I'm 1.3 thousand something, and
It's awesome. Congratulations, by the way. That's sick.
I appreciate that. In only like 7 months too. Like, that was crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot of growth.
Especially
for YouTube, not to like, but I feel like it's harder to grow yourself on YouTube than Twitch. Like, Twitch is pretty easy from a growth standpoint. As long as you're doing the right thing, you just kind of turn it on and go, but like YouTube, there's
it's the editing.
There's editing. There's all sorts of other stuff to be aware of behind the scenes, and editing is, in my opinion, is just more work than streaming. Like, personally,
it is
way more work than streaming, and anyone that disagrees
there's also
very good at streaming. I don't know.
There's also a certain art to streaming, because I suck at streaming. I've done it before. I hate it, and I suck at it. Like, I admire the work that you guys do, because overlays and like having things that are working and then having things crap out on you and not getting pissed at the entire world for that, like, that also takes a lot of patience. Whereas with YouTube, like, I can just sit back, have a this video is not sponsored, but energy drink, have some pizza, eat whatever I want, do whatever I want, take breaks. I can do whatever the hell I want when I'm doing.
I mean, to be fair, I liked editing. I edited some YouTube videos, and I did really enjoy that. I actually like really enjoy the process of going and sitting there, and like, I really loved cuts. I loved like all sorts of just like really random cuts at really specific times, and I would be like the kind of person that'd sit there for like 15 minutes trying to get it on like the exact millisecond of timing so I could make that like frame perfect cut that then I'd replay it 20 times to see. I love editing YouTube videos, but it's just so much work that I feel like I would probably be benefited on Twitch by just doing my stream, like at the point that I'm at now. But, and like, whereas, to be fair, well, now that I have a little bit of a following, it would be easier to build up on YouTube. YouTube is vastly harder to start from zero on than Twitch. Twitch is pretty easy to start from zero on. You can go live. But YouTube, you got to do something right initially and continue to do that thing right, and like continue to accelerate the growth organically. So kudos to you for doing it. Like, I'm very impressed. You and V, it's really cool to see you guys taking off on YouTube, because it's harder, in my opinion. It's a harder platform to make progress from zero. You guys both started out at zero, right? Like, yeah. So, I mean, it's cool, man. And like, definitely keep it up. It's cool to have the Dead Cells content over on YouTube, to like bring people in all areas. Cause it's like more people in the community, the better. Like, more people to talk with and share opinions and ideas with, the better. So,
and that's the thing. Like, I never intended to be a Dead Cells channel. It just kind of ended up that way, cause I got really good at the game.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I try to make my focus of the channel like mental health based a lot of the time. That's why I wanted you on the podcast. It's why in the description of every one of my videos, I've got hotlines up on there. Like, this stuff is like super important. And like, when we think about communities, right? Our community is not specifically aimed at social issues or mental health. But that stuff is always going to come up no matter where you are. Life happens, and you are always affected by politics. You're always affected by social issues. You're always affected by everything. And so if you don't have a space to talk about it, it's not productive. And if you're spending a lot of your time in one community that never addresses a topic, then you never get to say what's on your mind. So that's why I take the approach that I do. And I've gotten a couple questions like, why do you have suicide hotlines in your description? Because I probably have viewers who are suicidal and they may need that.
It might just come to somebody at just the right time. Like, there's those times where, I've been there. I've been at the point where I've been suicidal, and there's been those moments, those universal moments where something happens, and it can be as simple as you're scrolling through YouTube and just happen to click on the description of a video, and the first thing you see is like the suicide hotline. It's like, I was just thinking about that. Like, holy shit, that's kind of weird. Why not?
Exactly. And actually, just to go very quickly back on the topic of incels, I'm obviously not an incel, right? But there are some similarities. I'm 28 and I've never been in a relationship. I have had those moments of like thinking that I'm ugly and stuff like that. And, especially being brown, like there's a lot of like internalization with that, because growing up, the common stereotype was that brown men were ugly or creepy or whatever. So you internalize that, and then that affects you in dating life. Not to mention dating apps are like super racist anyways. So that also reinforces. So there's a lot of different things, right?
Society is super racist.
Society's super racist, and that projects itself onto dating apps. Yes, you're totally correct. It's not Tinder that's the problem. It's society that's the problem.
Yeah, it's the systemic problems everywhere that just happen to bleed into everything. But you're still right though. And again, like that's it's hard. It's good to hear that kind of stuff, because I can empathize to a degree, but I obviously there's a degree of empathy that I can't reach because I am white. So it's like I need to hear from people to be able to know what the struggle is. And that's what, to be fair, this year is, there's some bad shit happening, and then like good shit coming from that bad shit. And the only thing I can hope is, from all this terrible shit that's happened this year, that we can have like a really strong legacy of like
growth,
trying to stop this systemic problem of racism that is like literally like the white supremacy, and the systemic racism is like the top of the pyramid of like all the problems that encompass our country. And it's like everything falls underneath those. And it's like, we can't really start to really fix things until we address that. And there are still a lot of people, incels, for instance, in those alt-right groups that are like, you can't even like it's like political to say that racism still exists. Like, what the fuck? Like, you say that, it's like, yeah, racism doesn't exist. Trust me, like, I've been beaten up by a cop as a white guy, so I know. Like, okay, like they make some weird jumps in logic to try and excuse the fact that they just don't want to acknowledge that there's still like serious things that affect people that cause them to have a harder life than like you, the guy who, or that person who grew up in a rural white area with like a above middle income kind of family or something. So I live in Maine. I live in a part of Maine that's like probably 98% white. I know a lot of people. Well, I don't interact with them, but I know a lot of people who have the idea that racism is not a thing. And it's crazy to me to think that these people, who a lot of them have never met a black person, can like think that it's not a thing, and can also not see that I feel like there's some sort of irony there to being like, racism's not a thing. You don't even know the struggles. You've never witnessed, another person of color in your life, let alone you've never like seen the struggles they go through, and you won't educate yourself to the struggles. And that in itself, to me, feels like that's part of the systemic problem in itself. Like, the people who are able to just shut themselves off from the cultural issues that are affecting like everyone, because it doesn't affect like literally you, just you yourself. Like, I don't know, but I
I
don't
think
want
in
to
a
talk.
yeah, sorry. I think in a very simplistic sense, you are not that person, so you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
So you can't apply your shit and your logic to them because they're different in a lot of respects, not just skin color, but even religion or money or where they are. Like I live in Cincinnati, you live in Maine. Like that's different cultures right there. Like how I see
I
things.
get pulled over by the cops and like I don't like, dude, like honestly, like not to sound too real or anything, but like if I was a black person in this country right now, I would be scared, so scared to get pulled over by cops because there's just so many cops that just seem to like go off like for no reason. Maybe they just had a really shitty day at work and they just their wife just texted them that they want a divorce, and then they pull this fucking poor black man over and like it, like I have a lot of issues with the way that that's handled, but ultimately it's like, how can you possibly know what it's like if like I hate being pulled over by the police. I am worried about being pulled over by the police. I am worried about getting pulled over by someone who could take a gun out of their holster and kill me and get away with it legally. And
Yeah,
that wouldn't happen to me, but like that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, you know? Which I mean,
yeah,
to be fair, that is the one super positive thing of social media that I'm absolutely like in love with, is the fact that
the
we're
awareness.
taking the like the middleman of mass media out of the equation, and we're just saying here's all of the stuff that's happening. Like rather than saying here's Fox News's list of things that you should know about what happened in the world today, you know, it's like maybe 10 years ago the George Floyd thing wouldn't have blown up because maybe it wouldn't have
No,
gone to
it wouldn't
social
have.
media in the way and would have gone viral. I would have hoped that it would have, but I mean, to be honest, I feel like the virality of these kinds of videos, it's making it impossible to not acknowledge there's a problem. It's like if you are if you're still pretending there's no problem, head in the sand, you know.
And the thing is that this has always been happening. People
Yeah.
act like the country was completely sane before, and this all this stuff happened because so and so got elected and this and that. No, this shit's always been like that. If you go like, I'm gonna only go back 30 to 40 years, right? War on drugs. The very intention of the war on drugs was to throw in BIPOC communities into jail and to imprison them for life because they were part of a certain voting bloc that was against Reagan and against Nixon, against all these dudes. So that's why they kept him in prison for forever over minor weed charters. Very, very intentional. And people don't realize that. Like all the propaganda that was spouted out about drugs. If you go back and watch those PSAs, look at all the drug dealers and like what they looked like. Usually people of color. If they weren't people of color, they were usually like like a poor white guy. Like they were who are also very, very much uh, affected by systemic problems. And like there was so much propaganda put out of so, like who looks like what and who's dangerous and stuff like that. And that's what we kind of ended up internalizing as a culture. And so you got all these stereotypes coming around now, and then it's just like, oh, they deserve this because they must have been doing X, Y, and Z. Like even if they were, does that justify them being in prison for life? Does that justify them being killed on the street? No, it doesn't. Like you got to look at things. You gotta look at things from a compassionate perspective.
I don't think
First of all,
anything justifies murder, and I don't think that the police should be allowed to just kind of, and not to just, all I want to say is just I'm totally 100% against the police just being like legally allowed to murder uh with their own like, because a lot of them apparently don't have uh the like the the direction, the moral ethical direction, or just in general the understanding of the way life works, to where I'm afraid that these people are going to make like the wrong conclusions in at de-escalating a situation. And I feel like it just comes down to the fact that police in America are pretty much just not taught to de-escalate. Like you go to another country in the world and their police officers are taught de-escalation methods. You know, they
mhm.
have, you go to like even Britain and you've got like, you know, dudes with knives who are basically just being surrounded by a bunch of guys in riot shields and then brought down and then brought to a mental hospital. And then like, you know, and it's like, in this country, if that person was white, maybe that's how they would respond. If that person was black, they'd be
Nope.
shot.
Yep.
And it's just you can't ignore it anymore. So
You
if there's going to
can.
be anything coming from this, if there's going to be anything of this legacy, it should be that this is like our generation's like civil rights movement, and that we can maybe start to like, I don't think we're ever going to be able to like erase racism because, but we can definitely mitigate the effects of systemic racism significantly. And I mean, that's why it's like there's stuff like affirmative action that, these incels will immediately use as like the anti-race. They're like, oh yeah, you think racism still exists? Well, it doesn't exist. Also, affirmative action is opposite racist, so you lose, liberals. It's like, I heard someone talk about it the other day, like affirmative action is literally just a bandage on a gaping wound. Like
Yes, I
it's
love that analogy.
yeah, so I can't take credit for it myself, but it's like bandage on a gaping wound. And it's like, if you don't, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get too
Good.
much more into it, but yeah.
It's good intentions to a problem that it doesn't fix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, because all it does is, like colleges, for example, right? I think that's the biggest example for affirmative action. So you admit a certain amount of people, based on certain diversity factors, which is fine. But at the same time, there's all the systemic issues still occur in college. Like college is so elitist and the stuff is so difficult, and they provide some tutoring, but the tutors are students and they also suck. So it's like you provide very little in the way for these kids. So you still have the rich kids from private school who will succeed more and who have money and can bribe the schools, your Lori Loughlin's of the world. Then you have your kid your kid from Brooklyn. At least Brooklyn used to be poor. I don't know about now, but your kid from Brooklyn that grew up in the hood and they're coming to college now, and then it's different than their public school, and they're expected to be able to match their more privileged peers. So affirmative action, it's exactly like a bandage. That band-aid comes off as soon as you get into college, and then you got to be working 2 jobs to support yourself financially, and you got to be going to school, and you got all this crazy amount of work that they give you for no reason. The college, college college pretends to be progressive, and they're not. They never have been. It's all a scam at the end of the day. Like, do we really need college? Probably not.
We could use college if it was more like, I feel like trade schools are almost like better to a degree, because you go into a trade school, you get like an apprenticeship, you learn a trade, and then you get out of there and you've usually got like a job. And you also have like a meaningful skill, like you learned how to weld or you learned how to do this or that. Like, those almost seem better. It's just the problem is that it's like society doesn't glorify those. Like society doesn't say like, we need welders. Like society's like, you could be a doctor or an engineer or the astronaut in that space station and stuff. And it's like, unfortunately, we need some people who are really good. Like, and that's not to say that, and just because you aren't an astronaut, you're like valueless or something. And like, I know some people who do menial jobs for their whole life that are extremely smart and are also really, really talented at like metalworking, and they're really good at it. And it's like, those are the people in school that are like told to go through a bunch of placement tests, and then they're like, oh, you'll be really good in like liberal arts or something. And it's like, and the school, instead of being like, it's not all about academic stuff, there's also like some other things to consider too. Like maybe you're not good at math, but maybe you're good with your hands, and maybe you'll be a good like carpenter. Or maybe you're not good with math, but you're good with like the math that a construction worker needs to do, and you'll be good with like AutoCAD for some reason. You know what I mean? Like there's so much, like, it's like going back to the dead cells thing, where it's like, you can't just like say, this is the best path for you, for everyone. And it's like, and then to go back to what we were talking about, it's like, you've got these rich people who are like, well, I worked for everything I have, because in their eyes, they went through high school, they did all this, and then they got into school on their own test scores, but they've also had their family's wealth and support behind them to help them to get to these places their whole life. Whereas there's also the poor black kid from Brooklyn who literally 40 years ago, his family couldn't even like own property. You know what I mean? Like there's like a generation of people before us who literally weren't even able to start building like, you know, like it's like, it goes back even to like, you go back to a lot of the anti-Semitism and that big thing about like Jewish people that like, they're all in accounting and they're all in finance. But the thing that, you know, you never learn in school is because Jewish people were like not allowed to hold any sort of property, but they were allowed to do work with people's money. So they got into specifically jobs handling finances because they couldn't hold their own like holdings. They couldn't hold their own property, but they could work with other people's property and other people's holdings. And that's how they developed their like livelihoods, you know? So it's like, you've got these systemic problems everywhere. And it's like, you've got stereotypes that it's almost kind of hilarious to think that there's a stereotype about Jewish people that almost was kind of created by the anti-Semitism of society that held them down so much. And then they were like, well, we only have like one really good thing we can do.
Well, that's how stereotypes happen. You know, you have stereotypes against Black and Latino people, and they exist because of the systemic racism that occurs. The whole stereotype that Southerners are dumb, right? I don't think it's true. I think it's a horrible thing to say. But
totally.
Because education there is so bad, it kind of reinforces that stereotype. That's why it exists.
Right.
A lot of these stereotypes exist because of the controlling, because of the, you know, the group of people that's higher up. Even think about media. Like, how do they, in the 90s, how did they portray LGBTQ plus communities? They portrayed them as either super flamboyant or like you know, freaks or whatever. And that's the stereotype.
Yep.
And that's ingrained into people, even though that's not true. So it's like, I don't know, stereotypes, I just feel are like, I don't know. I've learned to not believe them because of the fact that it's just narrative controlling.
Yeah.
There's certain cultural elements though. Like I do feel like, you know, there's certain parts of your culture that are going to stick out. I don't think those are stereotypes, but there was something else I wanted to touch on, which was you talked about dead cells and like, you know, how you can do so many different things, right? And you kind of just made something click for me right now. So, all right, so this is going to be kind of a weird series of analogies. So
I'm down. Let's go.
Do you remember that Reddit post that was talking about the heavy crossbow, like the cheese bill to get to 5BC or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
I hate that post. I absolutely hate it. I have nothing against the person who made it. I think they made it with good intentions. I hate it though, because of the fact that like, I couldn't put my finger on why I hate it. I went on a rant about it on my YouTube channel once as part of a larger rant, but at the time I said it was because, you know, people should be able to explore with what they, you know, have and be able to experiment. I still believe in that, right? But I think I can expand on it now. And it's because I hate standardized things. Standardized things don't prove your worth. Standardized testing in schools doesn't prove if you're smart. They don't prove if you're good at anything. All it is a way for the government to pat itself on the back and to punish certain schools. That's all it exists for. So it's like the same thing with this like heavy crossbow belt. Well, it was heavy crossbow before 1.8. Now it's some other weapon. I don't know what it is. I think it might be like the giant killer or something. My point is, when you standardize things like in a video game or in life, you're completely dismissing what people are good at. So if they're not able to progress in the game with what's called the cheese build, they're going to think that they suck at the game, which isn't fair to them. Like they may be so good at using the multiple knocks bow or the marksman, like Hyper Stifer X, amazing with the marksman's bow, one of the best that I've ever seen with that weapon, way better than me. And he struggles with certain weapons. Does that mean he's bad at the game? No, of course not. He's on 5BC. He's beaten the game 6 times. He's really good. But he may not be as good with that cheese build as he is with the marksman's bow. So it's just like differences like that. I think people tend to neglect sometimes. You can't apply the same logic to everyone and everything. It's what I was saying earlier. Like, you don't know someone else's situation. You can't apply your experiences to them. Yeah, you probably worked hard to get into school or whatever. I worked hard to get into school, but you know, my family was also not wealthy, but we were also, you know, we were pretty well off. We could afford sending me to a private school. and stuff like that. Now I'm on my own, and I don't have a career that's as financially stable, but at the same time I was able to overcome a lot of the things because I was able to depend on my family for that. And a lot of people don't have that privilege that I did. And at the same, so I can't say like, oh, you need to do this, this, and this to that person. Instead, I got to work with them and be like, hey, look, like, you're going through this right now. You're dealing with this. You're struggling with this. What can we use from what you have to make your shit better?
Like I've even struggled with that kind of line of thinking in my life because like I mentioned before, like I used to be really obese and then I lost a lot of weight. And there was like a small period of my life where I would be like just lose weight. Like, come on, like just stop eating so much. And it's like, you can't know the situation of everyone, and literally going beyond psychological stuff, you can't know everybody's metabolism. Like you just literally don't know what their metabolism is. But also, like when I was young, I used food to cope with my all of my various insecurities and stuff. And honestly, the only reason I'm not fat now is because I just have like digestive issues that pretty much force me to live a very like to live a very strict dietary life. But like even 2 years ago I was like 20-30 pounds more than this. And so you can't and I've always said that about Dead Cells on my channel, because there will always be people who will come in who will be like, I saw a tier list, or I saw this, or I saw someone talking about their favorite build. And there will always be people who will ask me what my favorite item is, or, people, and that's cool. But then there will be those people who are like, I need a build to beat 4BC.
Yeah.
That's the question where I'm like, all right, here's the thing. Like this game, like I could give you the build that I beat 4BC with, and you might hate it. And it might not even be a matter of that you're not good with it. It might be a matter of you being like, this is really boring. Like I want to go back to my build with my, my throwing knife and my ice shards double bound. Like I really hate playing Giant Killer and Rampart right now, but the streamer told me that this is the best build to beat 4BC with, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And then you're not having fun in the game anymore. And then what's the point of the game at that point? Because it's literally supposed to be fun.
Yeah. That's why, like, I've had that same question too, and I'm just like, dude, I cannot answer this question for you.
Got to explore. You got to just go with everything. It used to be like, oh, be careful what you unlock. Now it's like, just start unlocking stuff. Just start unlocking stuff, and I guarantee you that you will find that most things are not bad. And if you really hate something, just go in custom mode and lock it. If you really hate it so bad that it feels like it's ruining your runs, which I don't think you'll find. There's always going to be those items that you don't click with, but if you literally force yourself to use it for like 20 hours, you'll get good at it. Or you could just find something else to use that you have more fun with, and it will be. And that's the great thing about Dead Cells 2, not to keep talking about how great it is, but like I have played a lot of roguelites in my time before that, and always hated. The one thing about roguelites that I always kind of hated, and it's not a bad thing, it can be fun sometimes, but it's like, for instance, in Enter the Gungeon, there can be like, you can find like a combination of, kind of synergizing items and weapons that are so good that you can literally like just auto fire at every boss and win. And like, and I feel like there are like Slay the Spire builds that you can come up with that are just like obscene. Like it happens every once in a blue moon, but you get like the certain selection of artifacts, and everything is just like, you're never taking damage, everything's dying immediately, and Dead Cells, it's good because it kind of doesn't have that on either side. So it's like you don't have any builds that can really take you down so hard that you can't win if you're getting doled out these cards. But there's also no builds in Dead Cells that like, if you pick it, you will automatically win without any effort. Like even if you go and take, King DKC's best build and his favorite build that he has gotten, 30 wins in a row with, you might not like it, or you might suck with it, or you might just want to go back to or you might find more success with a shieldless build,
And I primarily play shield. I do use shields occasionally, but I'm more of a shieldless type of guy. And it's like, I've been able to find so many things I never thought that I would like. When they reworked the meat skewer in 1.6, I was like, okay, like this is way better than it was before. Am I a big fan of it? I don't know. Now it's my favorite weapon in the game. I think it's the best melee weapon in the game right now. A lot of people disagree with me on that, and that's fine, right? But that's what's worked for me. If someone were to ask me, and I were to
Meat
give
skewer
like
is so good. Meat skewer is so good. I'm sorry. Just I love the iframes on it and everything. I love the moveset. It's such a great, and I don't like weapons that move you forward, but I love the meat skewer.
it's the only weapon that can get you consistent kills in early game.
Oh yeah, and it's like no risk sometimes too. Like I've had times where I've just been literally spamming attack and just going back and forth through people, and like you're iframing through every random attack that they'll actually get off, and or you're breaching them and they're not even getting attacks off because they're just getting stunned every time. It's great.
The other, it also just like synergizes with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Double melee builds, ranged melee, support melee like firebrands and ice shards and shit. Like it and shields, like it synergizes with literally everything in the game. Like you can splash it onto any build and your build becomes better.
Yeah, I see meat skewer as one of those like S tier items. Like in my head, I see it as one of those S tiers, and for the reason being that it's like it's an item that you could just put it in a build by itself, and it could probably still win you runs. So like that's how I see S tier items. It's like, does it need fire and oil to make it work, or is it just good on its own? Like, does it need a root grenade to get crits, or is the damage good just punching somebody in the face with no bonuses or poison or bleed or anything? And like meat skewer is one of those things that's just like I've had so many just like I don't want to say easy runs, just fun runs that I had bad synergies and maybe poor stats, and it still was like doing well. So it's just, I mean, it can't be denied the meat skewer is has been reworked and is such a great weapon now in my opinion, but I don't think it can be denied. So
Yeah, and like me and you're slobbering over it, but then someone who's watching this could think it's literally the worst thing of
is
all
like
time.
literally typing in the comments right now, like, you guys are so dumb. I can't believe that you think that the meat skewer is the best way. Yeah, I mean, but it is. I mean, to be fair, I also have a lot of fun with it. So there's that. I also like. There's something to be said for, like what I was saying before. There's something to be said for using items that also like make you like have fun. And like
Yeah,
that's why the new javelin, for instance, is one of my favorite weapons, because it's just like it's just so much fun to use. It's such a fun item.
I had so much fun making that. I don't know if you saw that my war javelin guy, but I had so much fun making it because I got to tinker around with pretty much everything in this game. I went into custom mode and like unlocked one thing at a time just to run it with the javelin.
It's
And
awesome.
I would just run through prisoner quarters, sometimes the second level. Usually Arboretum because javelin is ridiculous in Arboretum.
Yeah.
Because there's like a million platforms. I just had so much fun with it. But there's two things I wanted to circle back to. First of all, if someone is offended at the meat skewer comment and they weren't offended at the first hour and 20 minutes of this, I think that's fine.
Yeah. And if you're offended by anything I say, just be clear. You can go and check me out on Twitch and send anything back to me, because I am totally full of it. So if I ever say anything offensive, it's usually a joke. And B, I totally welcome people to like I am not the type of person to like time someone out for a comment that's like, streamer, why do you do this? That's so dumb, or something like that. Like the only reason I've ever timed anyone out or banned anyone has been for literal like the N-word being dropped in my chat and it's never somebody like who you're surprised you heard it from. It's always just somebody who just showed up and you're like, oh, I gotta watch this guy. Like I know that this guy is like they're saying things in a way that like a 16-year-old who thinks they're funny would be saying things to you if they think they're like tricking you about something. Like, oh yeah, no, we were totally just down at the docks just having a walk, and like they were like smoking weed or something. Like that's the vibe. And it's just, I don't know.
No, I get you.
I love to keep it open with everyone. And if somebody says something that I feel like I need to address, I'll address it. But I feel like more often than not, I'm telling people I'm kidding, because I tend to say things that I feel like would offend a lot of people. But again, and it's like kind of like you said, like if you're still watching my channel now and you haven't been offended by something that I've said, you probably won't, because I've probably made a lot of people leave who've been like, this guy's an asshole, like leave, I'm gonna go watch someone else. But
Well, I also think it's also about like, we can hold ourselves accountable. And if if we said anything during the course of the last hour or so that's been like, I don't agree with this and I think this is kind of problematic, I think that's important to point out because none of us are perfect. We're
I've
all
had,
constantly learning. Like,
yeah,
and I said this earlier, like, I'm a person of color, but I also grew up with a family that could afford to send me to college. Like, it's just things like that. Like, sometimes I don't know my privilege to a certain extent. And I think all of us are like that.
as long as you're empathetic though, like you can like you will never overstep your bounds to a degree, because even though you might not fully understand your privilege, you can step outside of yourself enough to recognize when your privilege is giving you benefits, or when you might be, wrong to say that your privilege didn't grant you this when it might have, or something. But again, you seem to have a pretty good understanding of all those concepts anyways. So, but
And then the thing that I want to get across is that none of that invalidates the hard work that I put in. I struggled in grad school. I
yeah,
have had mental health problems in my life. I've had X, Y, and Z things happen to me. So, like, we all have our advantages and disadvantages in life. Just because I've had certain advantages, it doesn't negate the disadvantages that I've been through. It doesn't dismiss my experiences. It doesn't.
sure.
Yeah, and for you, same thing. Like, you're white, but you've also been through a lot in your life, and your resilience and your hard work helped you get to where you are now. So I think
Like my
people.
issues have not been like, systemic racism related issues. My issues have just been kind of issues that, to be fair, could probably affect anybody, and do affect a lot of different people. I'm bipolar. I have, a father who killed himself, very, so like
Yeah,
that is not a white or black thing though. Like that's like, there are people of all races who have dealt with that, and people at all, and that's even, I think, going to the wealth thing, because we just recently had Breckful who killed himself, and that kind of goes back to,
who?
there's an element of where people start to be like, oh well, if you have enough money, like you deserve our
Oh,
shame.
Was he the Twitch streamer
That
who?
killed himself
Oh my
after
god,
he was like bullied on Twitter. I went and read it
that's
too. I went and
sad.
read and it was like, whoa, first off, all of those people should be ashamed of yourself. If you're one of those people that happened to post on Reckful's tweet that he posted before he killed himself, you should feel ashamed of yourself.
What
Really. Because there
happened?
was he posted something about his like ex who he hadn't been with for a while, like proposing marriage to her. It was kind of like it was like a cry for help moment. It was like he was clearly like reaching out to Twitter, and then basically, as you would imagine the typical dregs of the internet to respond, everybody came out and was just like, loser, you're a loser, and like all sorts of stuff. And then he killed himself like an hour later. So, and then everybody went and deleted all of their comments one by one by one. Like, but at the end of the day, there's everyone is just, it's us against them with everyone. That's, I think, a main issue is like, if I'm poor, I can make fun of Reckful because he's rich from Twitch streaming. So clearly he can handle it because he's rich and he's
Doesn't work like
and it's like, there are people who have millions of dollars and they have a parent that killed themselves and they are dealing with the same mental troubles and trauma that I am. And like, yeah, $1 million would make some problems really easy, but it literally does nothing to address some of these other things. And then that also creates another mental health crisis where you've got, people of affluence or even of just modest wealth who feel like they should be happier with the things they have and that kind of stuff. And it's like, everyone's entitled to be sad. It doesn't matter if you're super rich or super poor. You're entitled, are entitled to have like mental health issues, and to
that.
have, and you're entitled to be heard about those things. So
And
I don't know.
and I love what you said there because when I was an intern a few months for the past school year, I was at a substance abuse recovery center, and I facilitated a group once in intensive outpatient group once a week. And one of the things that I really wanted to get out there was it was a very diverse group. You had all different races, all different cultures, different backgrounds, different substances. And so one of the things I tried to talk about was like, look, you grew up in these certain circumstances. You grew up in these certain circumstances. You both had the exact same drug of choice. Now, why is that? because mental health doesn't discriminate. It's because stuff like this doesn't discriminate. Now, I will say systemic issues can lead to mental health problems, right?
Mhm.
But if we think about mental health in terms of like, biology plus ecology
I
plus
mean, you were talking about it earlier with like your own like kind of demons that you deal with as a result of the stereotyping of
I mean,
that's
that does give me anxiety when it comes to dating,
yeah.
right? And so, like, there's different things like everyone goes through because of their life circumstances. But at the end of the day, a lot of mental health does kind of looks not similar, but mental health affects a lot of people for so many different reasons. It's a branched thing. Like, it doesn't matter how you got there, but you're there.
Doesn't matter if you're rich, white, black, poor, like literally anything. Like you can be bipolar, as long as as long as it runs in your family on the on the father side. It's like it doesn't discriminate. These kind of mental health issues don't discriminate on anything, and so, but the world discriminates and assesses your needs based on how much you already have. So
That's the thing. Like, and if that were this is, I was, there's a really small YouTuber that I follow. His name is Beals, and he does a lot of Skull the Hero Slayer type of thing. Um, and he was talking about perfectionism today, right? He did
mhm.
a short little social commentary. I thought it was a really good video. Um, and something that ended up coming up was people comparing their struggles to other people. Like, I often see this, like, oh, my situation was not as bad as yours, but blah 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 blah. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I hate it, and I do that sometimes too, right? But I hate it when that's said, because it's like, you don't know if your situation was better than mine. You don't know if it was worse than mine. All I know is that my situation happened, and I dealt with it this way. Your situation happened, you dealt with it this way. Everyone is like, you got to look at things independently. You can look at things like, okay, this systemic issue is causing this thing, but how we are dealing with things is so different from person to person. It's
Right.
culture, it's family, it's environment, it's your education, it's generally how you perceive things, your personality, fucking horoscopes, just whatever you
Yeah.
want to throw out there.
Yeah.
That's it, everyone is so different. That's why I love being a social worker. It's because, like, every situation is so distinctly unique, and you
Mhm.
have to look at it from every possible angle when trying to problem solve with the client. That's why I don't like making assumptions when it comes to clients. And it's just like, this is I want you to tell me your story, what you're thinking, what you're going through, and then let's work together from there.
You're basically doing like almost like mathematical equations, but just on like a social level instead of at like an actual like mathematical level. Like you still have to approach everything with an analytical and critical thinking mind, like you're solving a problem on your homework. It's just in this case you have to apply it to real people instead of literal numbers and integers and stuff. So it's like it's cool what you're doing, and I imagine that for the right person getting into it for the right reason, it's like insanely beneficial. Like you have to think that your impact on even a couple of people could be monumental in their lives. That being in your kind of field is uh it's I would almost even say it's kind of a privilege to a degree, because you have a lot of power
Oh yeah.
to
Oh
to
yeah.
to affect things. And so it's like making sure that you obviously are the kind of person that actually cares about others and wants to actively help, because there are going to be those people that exist within the mental health field in general that for some reason didn't get into it like with the idea of like helping everybody or something. Like I've had like one therapist that like their whole purpose was to try and like get me to do things like their way they wanted to, and that I was, and to kind of like shame me about choices that I made. I was on medical marijuana at the time. I
Mm.
remember having an hour-long therapy session where I basically had to convince her that it was not bad for me. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're my therapist. I'm paying you money. Uh, like, it's not your place to be like, marijuana is bad, and my daughter got arrested for marijuana and it's bad and you shouldn't smoke it, and then to waste my fucking hour-long therapy session to tell me that that is bad. And it's like, uh you know that's not what I'm looking for when I go to a therapist or a mental health provider. I'm not looking for like validation. I'm not looking for them to like pat me on the head and say, "Good job, you're doing everything right." But I'm looking for someone who's going to challenge me, but not like, like rather than say medical marijuana is bad, maybe approach it and say, like, have you tried every possible form of therapy that you could try other than this? Or maybe even just shut up and don't, presume to know anything about my situation, and like, don't presume that, your daughter's recreational use of marijuana applies to me having a medicinal card and, using it for a medicinal purpose, but
Yeah. And
so there's people who get in the mental health field that don't get into it for the right reasons. Maybe they think that they're into it for the right reasons, but so it's good that there's people like you out there who
I
are
I appreciate.
empathetic.
I mean, savior complexes. They think that they're. I'm not saying this is everybody,
Yeah.
but I think sometimes what people forget in the mental health field is that you are not always right. You don't hold all the answers, and just because you have the power doesn't mean that you have the knowledge. And you did say something earlier that really stuck out to me, and I love that you said this. When you are a therapist or a social worker or whatever, there is a lot of privilege that comes with that because you have a lot of power over someone's life. Granted, not everything I say is going to make it, into their ears, but um, you
Some
can.
people, it will at a certain time in their life, it will be like the most important thing that they could hear.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I've learned and that I'm continuing to learn, and as I get more and more into this field, I just got my license, so obviously I'm still kind of a little I'm a little nugget, and I'm trying to grow, right? And one of the things that's always sticking out to me is just like, look, like I'm not gonna try to change your mind on this. You do what you want to do, but you let's try and analyze the situation, see if this is really what's best for you. Like medicinal marijuana, I can't say whether or not it's the best thing for you, but let's try to answer those questions and be like, okay, is this something that's going to help you going forward?
Right.
And that's something I always found myself at odds with therapists over, is because they don't know me. They've all been um not in a similar situation as me.
Yeah.
None of them had the problems that I went through. None of them were in the same cultural background as me. I'm not saying they have to be, and in fact, most of them they're not going to be. It's not realistic to expect that.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like you've got to give me some leeway as to what my expectations are, what my perspective is. You got to give me some leeway, and you can't tell me that I'm wrong for thinking certain things. You've got to let me be angry for a minute. You've got to let me be this or that. Now, it's not healthy to always be angry, and I get that. But at the same time, you've got to let me do it in some capacity, because what other outlet do people have? Because you're not allowed to be angry sometimes. You're just not allowed to be. And with all the shit that's going around in the world, yeah, I'm pissed off a lot because, I hate our political system. I hate the fact that, minorities can just get killed for no reason. I hate that shit. And I hate that people who try to protest it get gaslighted. I hate all that stuff. I hate the fact that, there was a huge governmental neglect and 200 people died and 300,000 people are homeless. I hate that all this stuff. Well, we don't know that for sure, but that's what's, being spread right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate that that's a possibility, that neglect has led to hundreds of thousands of lives being destroyed. And I hate all that stuff. I think it's okay to be angry. I think it's healthy to a certain degree to be healthy to a certain degree to be angry.
I've always learned that from people, is that it's not good to be like living amongst it. And there's a difference between being angry about something and then like being angry about stuff that you can't control. And when I say that, I would say that that doesn't necessarily mean like don't be angry about the political climate, but I would say that don't be angry about literally things in your own personal life that are outside of your control. Like, did that guy cut you off?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
why you're late for work this one day because your car broke down, stuff like that. But yeah. So, I mean,
No, definitely, and that's something that we try to teach as part of. There's a few social work models or therapy models or modalities, whatever the hell you want to call them. If anyone else from class is watching this, don't kill me for not knowing terms. Um,
Yeah, this
I'm
is a
so
test.
I'm so bad at terms. Anyways, there's a lot of modalities that kind of go into like, reassess the way that you're thinking about a certain situation that's beyond your control. Like, if like you said, like I love that example of someone cutting you off in traffic. You literally don't know what the situation is. Maybe that person is drunk, but also maybe they're having a bad day and their mind's just kind of out of it right
Or
now.
they're just texting and they're
Or
not paying attention.
maybe they're doing something super shitty like drinking and driving, or just a happy accident.
But I think that that it's important to always keep in mind in your own head that it's like you can be mad at that person for cutting you off, or you can do everything in your power to avoid having anything negative happen as a result of them cutting you off. Like you could just make sure that you've got your blinker on and that you're staying 2 car lengths behind him and all this stuff, so that you could be angry that this person slighted you, or you could just be staying safely away from people to make like my grandpa always taught me to never trust blinkers, because one time he pulled out, there was somebody had their right blinker on turning right, he pulled out, got immediately like sideswiped and almost died. And it's kind of like it's kind of a reach, but it's like you could be dwelling over the person that made the decision that is slighting you, or you could just try your best to equip yourself to be good after that person cuts you off. And you could be mad about it, you could be like, what the fuck, that guy's an asshole, and then move on, rather than follow him to his house and get out of the car and threaten to beat him up. But also, if you were riding up on his ass and you didn't notice that he like maybe turned his blinker on or something, is it really that guy's fault for for cutting you off at that point? Like there have been times where I've gotten mad at somebody in a driving situation and it's totally my fault,
Yeah. And well, even in Dead Cells, Hand of the King's not going to do the same attack every single time.
You just
And
have to be ready for it.
yeah, you got to be ready for it. You can only control what you can control. So what can you control? You can control the parrying, the dodging, the attacking, control whatever you can. Hand of the King's going to do whatever he does. Now you just got to adapt to the situation.
Yep.
That's just the way I love playing Dead Cells. Just adapt to the situation. I know it's getting late for you. So I do want to thank you for the conversation. I think this has been an awesome podcast.
Dude, thanks for having me on. This has been great. I really appreciate you inviting me on. And yeah, it's been really nice to just talk about just stuff and a little Dead Cells. It's very reminiscent of like my stream, except it's more of like a one-on-one. This is like what my stream is a lot of the times like, which is great.
And so I did want to ask you one more question before we signed off. 2 more questions before we signed off today. Why do you always use velocity in every single one of your runs?
I used to nonstop use Hunter's Instinct, and that was because I just liked that very minor amount of cooldown reduction that would come from pretty much everything, because I'd always used like ranged skills and everything. Then they removed skills from the cooldown reduction from Hunter's Instinct and Brutal Instinct, and I don't really use those as much anymore. To be honest with you, it's not really like a strategic decision. It's kind of more of like sometimes I forget that I've got my mobility buff on and I talk like this and I'm blah, 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 blah. And then, it's like, okay, Forgotten Sepulcher, great example. There are times where I have had my velocity, carry me through a section that I was like, oh my God, there was no torch there. Like I would have died back there if I didn't have velocity that I got, 20 seconds ago from killing a bunch of guys. You know how the Sepulcher goes. You can just get totally RNG'd by some real bad lantern placement and like some really bad, whatever. So honestly, I always try to tell people with my mutations, like I just kind of pick 3 that I feel like have impact on my play style the most. I'm fairly confident there are like 10 other mutations I could take other than velocity that would actually be more effective in most builds. But I like velocity. It keeps my speed up. It keeps me going. And having the speed buff last for 30 seconds sometimes actually gives me a little help in like certain zones like the sepulcher. So I would say it's kind of one of those just things of habit that I've developed. And it's mostly because I can never figure out, I hate sitting there. You'll very rarely, if ever, see me being one of the Dead Cells players who like analyzes everything. Like you'll usually see me pretty quickly like run through, roll a couple of things to maybe try and get poison on something, go reroll my mutations if I'm at the very last biome, and then like sometimes I forget to reroll my mutations for the last boss because I'm going so fast. Like I don't like to sit there and dwell on my mutation selections or my affixes too much, just because and that's not something that I think that other players should do. It's kind of one of my do as I say, not as I do. I don't think other people should do that, but that's just kind of like the pace of my stream that I keep up, and I kind of just blast through that stuff. So it's kind of just like I could situationally analyze every run and be like, okay, the best mutation would probably be this, or I could just pick velocity and just go with it. And I know that I'm not going to lose because I picked velocity until I get to the 5BC boss. If I don't reroll my mutations before the 5BC boss, there's a chance I lose because I don't do that. But I've gotten to a point where I'm comfortable enough with those 3 mutations, the masochist, disengagement, velocity combo, that I can basically just use those up until the 5BC boss, which, for me as a lazy person is great. So easy choices.
All right. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Given that we've talked about like so many different things throughout the past hour and a half, if you wanted the viewer to take away just one thing from our conversation, what would that be?
Man, I feel like we drew a lot of like parallels to all sorts of different things in this conversation. So I actually feel like it's not that hard to answer. Like, you have a lot of things in your life that you can control. You have a lot of things in your life that you can't control. You can waste a lot of time in your life being angry about things that you can't control, or you can just focus on the things that you can control, and understanding that not everybody's situation is the same. And this applies to like literally real life. It applies to Dead Cells. It applies to everything. It's like it applied like when you were talking about stuff, and you were talking about how you were talking about like how some people are just better at some things than other, and in these like video games, if you kind of, those get suppressed almost because people are like, you have to do it this way. Like it's really bad in like games like League and Dota. I've never actually played those, but I know it's like those kind of games where if you pick the wrong hero, everybody will flame you on your team for the entire game and blame everything on you, even if you're not at fault. So I think it's important first off, you do you. Try not to worry too much. It will be hard, but try not to worry too much about other people. Don't get angry about the way other people are doing things. Just do things your way, and then like try things out in life, and try to change. And change is really important. And I think that we're in a part of society right now where it's like we have people who want to change and people who are comfortable with status quo, and status quo can be detrimental to like everybody. But at the end of the day, I think that like in Dead Cells, in life, in everything, it's really important to focus on yourself and not so much about focus on what other people are doing all the time. Don't focus on, what V.me or me are playing all the time as our Dead Cells builds. Other than as a way of being like, I see that you use this weapon a lot. Obviously, there's got to be something valuable to it if you're using this item 70% of your runs. But, or if you're constantly talking about it. But like at the end of the day, you might pick up the torch, which is one of my favorite weapons, and be like, this is shit. I hate this. I don't want to use this anymore. Why did he tell me to use this? Try things for yourself. And, because don't let people try to cookie cutter you, and like it, because it happens so much in Overwatch where it's like you have somebody who is very good at something, and then everybody shames them in the team into playing something that they're not good at because they see it as being necessary for like the meta of the team comp to win. But it's like I've had so many games in Overwatch where we won with completely non-meta team comps because everyone was playing on the character that they were the best at. There's always been this issue in the Overwatch community and in competitive games like that, where it's like, the people would rather you play a class you're not good at if it conforms to the meta, rather than be not meta and let you play the class that you've got 5,000 hours in. So it's like, that's a toxic mentality. Let people do what they want, especially in the case of these like 5,000 hour Junkrat mains that are like top 500 and they're going to carry your game. Even though you think Junkrat's bad and you perceive Junkrat to be bad in this team comp, he's got a 75% win rate and he's top 500 in the world. Like, who are you to say what is important? It's all you. So in life, in Dead Cells, in video games, whatever, don't let other people like determine your pace. Do you. Try not to worry too much about other people. It will be hard. I do it all the time. But like at the end of the day, just be happy with what you've done for yourself. You know, I have days sometimes where I sign off my stream and I actually like feel bad about something that I said to somebody, or I feel bad about the way that I handle a situation. Sometimes I even have days where I feel like maybe I got like too angry about something, you know, a game that I'm playing, but everyone always comes back. So it's like, just be yourself, be you. I always tell people, like, I am not putting on an act on my stream. So, you know, there are a lot of streamers out there that are them, you know, they put on an act. And if you want to see one of those people, there's tons. But like for just me and just like my raw emotions spilling out all the time, you know, that's what my stream's about. And it took a long time for me to get to a point where I was comfortable being like this in front of people. It took a long time. And I wish that it hadn't taken me so long, because I feel like I could have done more with my life. And so it's like, I wasted a lot of my life worrying about how others perceived me. And it's just like, I think I could have, you know, I'm not going to regret or look back on anything that I did and wish that I'd done things better. But like, if I could give one piece of advice to people, it would literally be like, try not to focus so much on how everyone sees you outside of the, like, you know,
people who matter.
Yeah, exactly. But, and I guess that's what I'd say would be my hopeful takeaway for people, is just like, you know, the life is, there is no cookie cutter best way for everyone. There could be a dude who is like almost in exactly the same like financial situation as you, like grew up in almost the same like family situation as you, and he might have a totally different perspective on things, and he might have like a totally different slew of problems that he has to deal with that completely change his development. And like, you couldn't apply, you know, you could go and look at him and say, oh, we've lived like the same life, so why didn't you just do this way and you would have had this result? But it's like butterfly effect shit. It's like, how can you even know that what is it? It's like gambler's fallacy or something. It's kind of like you see it in like Dungeons and Dragons, where people will be like, they'll roll the dice to see what would have happened if they had taken this move, and they'll be like, oh my God, I would have rolled an 18. It's like, but what if you had rolled that dice in choosing to make the decision, rather than just rolling the dice after to see if you would have won or lost? It's a gambler's fallacy. It's like, you might have rolled a 2 when you actually rolled the dice when it mattered. And you might have just rolled that 18 because that's just the way the universe willed it at the time. So yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stop rambling about that now. But it was really fun. This was really fun. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you, man. And I really appreciate what you're doing, not to keep going, but what you're doing on YouTube, your content. It's great. And please keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you too. Follow the man, twitch.tv/krobloons. That is KROBLOONS. Y'all can tell him that I sent you, or you don't have to. It's all good. Either way, what times do you stream?
I usually start around 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time most days, sometimes a little bit later, sometimes a little bit earlier too. My schedule has been spotty here and there because I've been going through, like, I had like some surgery and been trying to find a house and doing all sorts of real life stuff. So my schedule is a little spottier, but I'm around most days, at least for like a short stream here and there. So, trying to get more back on the like 5 to 6 days a week schedule, but that can be hard sometimes to handle with all sorts of stuff. So, but yeah, so I mean, most days around 8 or 9 Eastern Standard Time is when I'm starting.
All right. Well, y'all heard it from the man himself. One last question, and this is the question I always ask everyone who's on this podcast. What are you going to be doing tonight to take care of yourself?
I am going to go. Ooh, it's 8:15. I'm literally going to go take my meds that I need to take because I take my meds at 8:30, and then I'm going to go. My wife's going to be getting home in about 15 minutes, so I think I'm going to sit down with her and watch a little TV and just relax. I don't know if that qualifies as doing something for myself.
100% that does.
But yeah, I'm gonna just spend the rest of the night, relax, and go to bed. I'm actually not super tired right now, so I probably won't go to bed as early as I normally do. So, but this was fun. This got my energy going a little bit. It's been a while since I've been this awake this late. So,
well, I hope to have you on again as a guest sometime. You are the third to last of the season. Next season, I will be having a co-host. I don't know if you know Monospite.
yeah,
he was on episode 1, so he will be my co-host starting in season 2. Whenever I launch season 2, I don't know when the hell I put these out. Did want to thank you again, and I thank the viewers. I love everyone in here. Hope you're all staying safe.
Follow him. Follow him. I don't know what side you're going to be on, whichever one. Follow this guy.
On the right side.
You're on the right side. Okay.
All right, Crow, I will see you later. Have a great night.
You too, man. See ya.